Peter Griffin sits on the edge of the bed, feet dangling, his gaze lost on a point that doesn't exist. The morning light timidly slips through the window, drawing lines on the floor that move like tiny rivers with no destination. His shirt is wrinkled, his tie crooked, his hair disheveled. But none of that matters, because no one sees him yet. No one except himself, and maybe the silence that surrounds him. And within that silence, there's something we all recognize. The feeling of not being enough, of knowing that no matter what we do, there's always an emptiness staring right back at us. Peter feels it, and so do we, even if our lives don't include giant chickens or absurd shouting. When he was a kid, Peter learned something many of us learn in different ways. To exist, to be remembered, you have to provoke some kind of reaction. His father, Francis, measured his worth with blows and disapproval. His mother seemed too busy living in a world where he didn't quite fit. So Peter discovered that the only way to be seen was to make people laugh, to perform, to exaggerate, to stand out. And he did. That need for validation, born in childhood, is something we all feel at some point, even if we don't realize it. We've all sought a glance that tells us, yes, you matter, and we've all felt the weight of not receiving it. Peter just does it louder, clumsier, and with fewer filters. He remembers summer afternoons in Quahog, chasing after things he couldn't reach, hearing laughter that sometimes approved and sometimes mocked. It's the same memory many of us share, the desire to belong, to prove something without knowing exactly what, to stumble and get back up and stumble again. Maybe that's why, as an adult, Peter fights giant chickens, dresses up in the middle of the street, and makes jokes that don't make sense. He does it to fill a void we all know, the need to be seen, to feel important, even if just for a moment, even if no one ever says it out loud. Peter's adult life is like ours, even if it's wrapped in absurdity. He wakes up early even when he doesn't want to, works at something that sustains him but doesn't make him proud, comes home and sits in front of the TV with a beer in hand, watching images that don't change his world but give him the illusion that something, however small, still makes sense. Routine is a mattress, humor a blanket. And while he watches Lois in the kitchen doing what she's always done, and his children growing up in worlds he barely understands, he feels something we all feel, a mix of pride and fear. Pride for having made it this far, for maintaining the life he has, and fear because deep down he knows that at some point it won't be enough. There are moments when laughter doesn't work, and those are the most honest ones, like when Meg confronts him with words that pierce right through, and he doesn't know what to say. We've all had that days when someone looks at us and tells us without hesitation that we're falling short, and we feel that emptiness, that silent fear. Peter falls silent, and for a moment, the child who always sought approval reappears, reminding him that everything he's done might still not be enough. And we see ourselves reflected in him, because we too have that child within us, the one who never disappeared, who lives behind our gestures, behind every attempt to be loved. Peter walks through the streets of Quahog and watches people go by. He sees hurry, conversations, lives that seem to fit somewhere. And in that vision, there's a quiet comfort we all understand. Nobody truly knows what the other feels, and yet we're all searching for the same thing. We all want to be seen. We all want to feel like our place in the world matters. And even if each of us does it in our own way, that impulse is universal. Peter does it his way, with screams, madness, and absurd jokes, and we do it in our own little strategies, smiles, silences, careful words, pictures we share, gestures we hope mean something.
He remembers his childhood and thinks of Francis, how absences and reproaches shaped him. We all have our own Francis, even if they take the form of bosses, friends, parents, or partners. We all carry those small scars that push us to act, to exaggerate, to seek attention in ways we don't always understand. And as Peter walks home, With the sun falling on the pavement and the city noises syncing with his breathing, he allows himself a rare thought. Maybe all of this, all the laughter, all the madness, all the attempts to stand out and be accepted, is just that. Attempts to tell the world, and himself, I'm here, I matter. And in that moment, any of us can recognize something of our own lives. Peter's teenage years were a chaos organized by the need to be seen. He walked through the school hallways like someone navigating a maze without a map, searching for signs of approval, gestures that said, "Yes, you exist." And when he found them, even fleetingly, it felt worth it, if only for a second. We all remember that moment, that teenage urgency to prove that we matter, to laugh so others would laugh with us, even if sometimes they were just laughing at us. Peter did it in an exaggerated, clumsy way, with a volume that almost hurt. But the engine behind it was the same: to feel valuable, to feel recognized, to not disappear. He remembers one afternoon in the schoolyard, trying to impress someone he doesn't even remember now. He climbed onto a railing, made a ridiculous gesture, and fell flat on his back in front of everyone. They laughed. Not quite at him, or at least not entirely. They looked at him, and that was enough. That laughter was like a breath whispering, "Peter, you're here. You're not invisible." We've all had falls like that, even if not physical ones. Moments when we expose ourselves, stumble, make mistakes, and a look, a gesture, a laugh confirms that we still exist for someone else. That's the lesson Peter learned before he could even name it. To feel alive, you have to take risks, make noise, be willing to look ridiculous. Later came college, or something like it, a place where everyone else's names seemed to fill all the space, and his own got lost in the echo of indifference. Peter found himself there trying to fit in, to stand out in the crowd. He did things that seemed silly, absurd, but again, the real purpose was hidden. He wanted someone to notice him, to say, "Yes, you matter." And sometimes he did, in small sparks. A smile, a look that held his existence for a heartbeat. We all know that feeling, that mix of anxiety and relief, the longing to belong and the quiet joy when we finally do, even for a fleeting moment. It was around that time that he met Lois. He doesn't remember her as extraordinary at first. He remembers her as a point of light amid the noise. Someone who seemed to see him differently. Someone who didn't just laugh at his jokes, but seemed to care. For Peter, that was a revelation, a quiet miracle. We've all had someone like that. A look that confirms we're not alone, that we're not mistaken, that something in us is worth noticing. And Peter held on to that with his usual clumsiness and enthusiasm. He didn't yet understand that love isn't a prize won with noise or antics, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that for the first time, he felt real, not just an invisible ghost walking through life. But life doesn't stop at discovery. Peter made mistakes, awkward, painful, human mistakes. And we all do, in our own ways. There are nights when he remembers how he tried to fit in with people who didn't want him there, how he got into trouble just to prove he could, that he was someone, that he had worth. Each failure, each fall, was a reminder that existence isn't granted by right. It's fought for, claimed, negotiated with every gesture, every attempt. Peter learned it in the most absurd way possible. But we know it too. No one guarantees you recognition. No one assures you a place. What you have are your attempts, your stumbles, and the persistence to keep going.
And there, somewhere between college and temporary jobs, Peter came face to face with a feeling we all know too well. The quiet mediocrity that creeps in. The routine that threatens to swallow us. the loneliness that seeps through even when we're surrounded by people. He found himself in bars and gatherings, in places where laughter seemed to cure everything, and understood something every grown-up eventually learns. Sometimes laughter isn't enough, but we keep laughing anyway. We expose ourselves to ridicule. We do what we can. We try to be seen, to belong, even knowing that emptiness will still be waiting at the end of the day. It was in one of those bars that Peter felt more human than ever. His friends around him, the beer trembling in his hand, conversations floating aimlessly, and suddenly, silence. Not an absence, but a presence. A moment of understanding that everyone there, like him, was just trying to survive in worlds they didn't fully understand, trying to fill their emptiness with noise and gestures. We all do it. We all look for our quiet confirmation that we exist, that we matter. Peter understood it in that wordless instant, and we understand it too, even if we've never fought a giant chicken or made a fool of ourselves in front of the entire school. And so, Peter goes on, moving through adulthood with mistakes and small victories, with joys and disappointments, driven by the same need we all share: to be seen, to be accepted, to feel that we matter. Every act of madness, every absurd gesture isn't just comedy. It's a silent scream we've all let out at some point in our lives. The difference is that Peter doesn't hide it. He shows it to us. And in that, we find a mirror, one that reflects our own fear of disappearing, our own desire to belong, our own struggle to feel worthy. And as he walks home, thinking about Lois, about his family, about the small mistakes that define him, Peter allows himself a thought few ever hear. Maybe all of this, the laughter, the stumbles, the madness, are just attempts to tell the world and himself, I'm here and I matter. It's a thought that belongs to all of us, even if we keep it in silence. And for a moment, the weight lifts, just a little, just for an instant. Peter wakes up early, like always, even though the bed holds him with the kind of comfort that almost hurts. The sun slips through the window, but it no longer scares him. He's learned to ignore it, to follow his routine like someone crossing a river without looking too deep into it. He gets up, puts on his wrinkled shirt and old pants, and walks to the kitchen, where Lois makes coffee with the patience only someone who has loved too much can have. He watches his kids starting their day, and for a brief moment he feels proud, a pride that doesn't need words to exist. But there's fear too, because he knows every day is full of small choices that could ruin everything. That mix of love and fear, of responsibility and clumsiness, is something we all know, even if our lives don't involve giant chickens or impossible plans. Peter has always wanted to be enough. He wants to be a good father, a good husband, a man who matters. But reality greets him softly every day. The kids challenge him, Lois corrects him, his mistakes multiply. We've all felt that, the quiet weight of not meeting what we think is expected of us. We try, we put in the effort, and sometimes it's not enough. Peter knows this, and he keeps going, with the clumsiness that defines him, with the exaggeration that protects him. His humor is his shield, his way of saying, I'm here, I exist, I matter, even if he doesn't always show it the right way.
There are days when he sits alone on the couch, the TV on, the world spinning outside the window, and he feels something anyone can recognize, the mediocrity that settles in quietly, the routine that threatens to devour us, the small loneliness hidden in everyday gestures. Peter tries to fill it with laughter, jokes, absurd fights, but deep down, in some corner of his mind, he knows none of it lasts forever. We all do the same. We all look for ways not to stare straight into the void. We all try to justify our existence with gestures, words, mistakes, and small successes. And sometimes we cling to whatever makes us feel like we matter, even if it's just for a moment. And there's Lois, looking at him with that mix of love and endless patience, the woman who's seen him at his worst and his best and still accepts him. We've all had someone like that, someone who looks at us and without saying anything, tells us that even if we don't get everything right, even if we fail, we still have value. Peter knows that, and even if he doesn't always show it, he clings to that quiet certainty. But even that certainty can't save him from his moments of collapse, from those times when he faces his reflection and sees a man who still doesn't fully understand how to be enough. He remembers one night in particular, sitting alone at the Drunken Clam. His friends talk and laugh around him, and he listens but doesn't really join in. For a moment, he allows himself to look inward, and what he finds is a child still craving approval, a man still wanting to be seen and loved, someone afraid that everything he does might never be enough. We've all felt that moment, that uncomfortable clarity when we see ourselves as we truly are, imperfect, vulnerable, trying to fill invisible voids. Peter recognizes it and feels it deeply, but he knows he can't stay there. He stands up, smiles, says something stupid that makes everyone laugh, and keeps going. That's his life, to move forward, even if fear and doubt never completely go away. And as he walks home, beer in hand, the city moving in rhythm with his breathing, Peter thinks about his mistakes, his small victories, about Lois, his kids, his friends. And in that quiet walk, there's an understanding we all share. Life doesn't stop for our doubts, our fears, or our failures. We keep moving, sometimes clumsily, sometimes gracefully, and that alone is enough to exist. We all know it. We've all felt it. Peter walks into his house and looks at his sleeping family. What he feels isn't victory or total relief or even full certainty. It's something smaller and bigger at the same time. The understanding that to keep trying, to keep making noise, to keep wanting to be seen, to keep being imperfect is what keeps him alive. That understanding makes him feel both lighter and heavier, as if he's carrying and releasing the same weight at all once. We've all felt it, even if we can't name it. We've all had moments when we recognize our vulnerability and our strength at the same time. And as he sits in silence, listening to the soft breathing of his children and the distant sound of the alarm clock that will mark another day, Peter realizes something that belongs to all of us. It doesn't matter how many times we fail, how often we feel insufficient, or if our humor and our chaos aren't always understood. What matters is the quiet persistence, the effort to be seen, the will to keep existing with dignity in a world that waits for no one. We all do that, every day, in our own ways. Peter Griffin just does it in his loud, exaggerated, and sometimes absurd way. In that instant, Peter smiles, not because he's figured everything out, but because he's accepted, if only for a moment, that being here, making noise, laughing, falling, and standing up again is enough. We all know that. We all feel it. And as he leans back, listening to the soft sounds of the house, he asks himself the question we all ask in silence. Will what we do ever be enough? Will we? And for a fleeting instant, the answer feels like yes, simply because we keep trying.
Peter sits alone on the couch, the house silent except for the distant hum of the fridge and the ticking clock marking each second of his existence. For the first time in a long while, there are no laughs, no shouts, no absurdities that cover the truth. He's alone with himself, and with everything he's always avoided facing. He feels fear, because behind every memory, every mistake, every joke that once saved him, there's still that child waiting for approval,
a man still wanting to feel he's worth something. We all feel it in different ways, that sense that no matter how much we do, it might never be enough. And Peter knows it. He faces it, even if he has no idea how to fix it. He remembers the first time Meg confronted him, with words that hurt more than any physical blow. He stood there in silence, trembling inside, realizing that for a moment everything he'd done might mean nothing. That feeling, one many of us know, still lingers, like an echo that never fades. We've all had those moments when someone looks at us and, without saying it outright, tells us our laughter, our efforts, our attempts might not be enough. Peter remembers and feels it again with an intensity that almost hurts. And yet, in the middle of that silence, something changes. Peter doesn't suddenly smile or find a magical solution, but he breathes. And in that breath, there's a deep understanding. He's been trying. He's been existing. He's been making noise so he doesn't disappear. We all do the same, even if it's in whispers, in small gestures, in invisible choices, in quiet love, in unseen mistakes. And in that moment, Peter understands he doesn't need to be perfect to exist, that his worth doesn't depend on constant approval, even if he'll always crave to be seen, that just keeping on is already enough. Peter stands up slowly and walks to the window. He looks at the city waking up around him and feels something he's never felt this clearly before. Life is an act of quiet resistance, an act of courage we all perform, even when no one notices. Every person walking down the street, every face crossing his path is fighting their own emptiness, their own fears, their own need to feel enough. And he, with all his madness, his clumsiness, is part of that too. We all are. And recognizing that brings a kind of relief words can't describe. He notices Lois in the kitchen making coffee, as always, his kids playing in the living room, the friends who'll probably be at the bar later, all living their own small chaos. And Peter smiles, not loudly, not seeking attention, not looking for approval. It's a smile that recognizes both the fragility and the beauty of existence itself, of the daily struggle, of the simple act of still being here, still trying, still being. We all understand that. We've all felt it. That smile doesn't erase his mistakes or eliminate his fear, but it puts them in their place, as part of something bigger, as part of life itself. And as the light filters through the window and the world begins to move, Peter Griffin feels something we all feel now and then, the quiet certainty that even if we fall, stumble, fake our laughter, or go unnoticed, existing is already an act of courage, and we're worth something simply for trying. That certainty doesn't make him perfect. It doesn't erase the mediocrity that follows him, but it makes him real. It makes him human. It makes him enough, even if only for an instant.
He leans back on the couch, watching his family, listening to the house's silence. And for the first time in a long while, he doesn't need to do anything else but be there. And as he does, he realizes something we can all feel if we pause long enough. Life gives no guarantees, but it gives us moments like this, when we can see our own existence reflected in something as simple as breathing, listening, watching, and keeping on. And Peter smiles again, and in that smile, there's an echo of all of us, of our small battles, our laughter and silences, of every attempt we make to feel like we matter. And maybe, In that very moment, as the sunlight gently fills the room and the world keeps turning, we can all ask ourselves in silence, am I doing enough to be seen? Am I really here, trying to exist fully, with all my imperfections laid bare? And maybe, just maybe, the answer is that it's already enough. Enough to keep trying, to keep showing up, to keep being human. And that, in the end, is far more than we think. And so, for now, the story of Peter Griffin comes to an end. Not with great victories, nor with perfect answers, but with something far closer to what all of us live. The quiet struggle to feel enough, to be seen, to truly exist. Peter isn't a perfect hero, nor a role model. He's someone who stumbles, who laughs to protect himself, who loves, who fails, who gets back up again and again. Just like all of us. If there's anything to learn from him, it's that life isn't measured by the laughs we provoke, or the mistakes we make, or the applause we earn, but by our capacity to keep trying, to keep being, to keep searching for meaning amidst the chaos. Each one of us carries a little bit of Peter Griffin inside. That child who wants to be seen, that adult who fears not being enough, that human being who keeps moving forward, even when everything feels absurd. If this story made you think, feel, or remember something from your own life, I invite you to share it in the comments, because here we're all part of this silent search. And if you want to keep exploring stories, emotions, and characters that reflect our shared humanity, don't forget to subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and join us on this journey, because there are still many lives to tell, many laughs and silences to uncover, and many connections to remind us that we are not alone in this. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And remember, sometimes simply continuing to exist is already enough.